It's a working paper with some organizational psychologists of mainly from Italy, and there's somebody who's from the University of Montpellier as well. Now, what is the motivation? Where did this come from? Okay, so air traffic controllers, they are very crucial in ensuring the air traffic safety. And any kind of lapse or human error can lead to what is called critical incidents. And critical incidents is any kind of a crisis situation that can potentially severely impact the management of the air traffic and can lead to loss of lives. And we know that more than 80% of the global air accidents can be attributed to human error. So for which it's very clear that information processing and decision making are some of the vital things for these professionals, air traffic controllers. Now, existing research shows that self-efficacy, which is individuals' belief in their ability to organize and execute an action that leads to a desired outcome, means I'm capable of managing a situation. That's self-efficacy. Research shows us that self-efficacy is one of the predictors of air traffic controllers' performance and their ability to deal with critical incidents. At the same time, the aviation literature has also shown that situational awareness, which can be called mindfulness, is very crucial for air traffic controllers to be attentive to the critical incident, to make timely and right decisions, and to avoid any kind of aviation accident. So what we thought was, we want to show, we have not seen any study that shows us whether, how, and when mindfulness can sustain air traffic controllers' self-efficacy in managing critical incidents. So our study, which is a mixed method study, so quantitative and qualitative study, was conducted on a sample of 168 air traffic controllers in Italy. 148 were men. As you know, this is a very highly gender bias for male profession. So these are people who have mean age of 44, 45 years, and people who have been in this profession for a fair bit of time, standard deviation of 8.5, 15.5. So the research question that we asked, well, several, how does the level of mindfulness relate to self-efficacy in assessing and deciding about critical incidents? And is this mindfulness associated with the way the air traffic controllers cope with the problem? So we were interested to find out about problem-focused coping mechanisms. We also wanted to see if there is a positive relationship between problem-focused coping tendencies and self-efficacy in assessing and deciding on critical incidents. And does previous experience of critical incidents foster the positive association between problem-facing tendencies and self-efficacy? I'll show this so that you can understand rather than reading my research questions. So we wanted to know how mindfulness is associated with self-efficacy in assessing and deciding, making the decisions about critical incidents. We were interested to know if there was an association between mindfulness and problem-focused coping for the air traffic controllers, and whether previous experience with critical incidents have influence on how our air traffic controllers' problem-solving tendencies translated to self-efficacy in handling critical incidents. So it's a moderated mediation or model. So what did we do? We used mindfulness, self-efficacy, problem-focused coping tendency, and other demographic questions, and some in terms of the quantitative part. And it was an online survey. And then we had very in-depth interview with 10 air traffic controllers. This is what we found. We found that air traffic controllers with high situational awareness or mindfulness are more likely to report high levels of self-efficacy. That is, my capacity, my belief in my own capacity to manage a problem situation gets high when I'm mindful. And we also found that mindful air traffic controllers are more likely to adopt a problem-focused coping strategy. But what was interesting to see, and of course, when they are likely to adopt problem-focused coping strategy, that makes them believe that they can effectively manage critical incidents. However, the indirect effect was statistically significant for air traffic controllers with greater previous experience with critical incidents, but not for those with poor experience of such critical incidents. So we found that previous experience had a moderating effect. Now, so basically our hypothesis was that mindfulness has an effect on self-efficacy, and problem-focused coping tendency was quoted. Now, what we wanted to go a bit deeper into the how questions. How does this work? How do these people deal actually on the ground? And those interviews were very, very revelatory because it showed us a lot of things that quantitative study could not show us. So first, we found how they make decisions. So these air traffic controllers, they talked about information filtering and processing. Information is incredibly important for this profession. So you're on the ground, there's a plane that's suddenly going to land because maybe the pilot has got a heart attack or there's some sort of an emergency that has happened, or that information. Now, the thing is, what was interesting was that there is often extra information. That's what they told us. And it's not about having enough information. It's about knowing what information should be filtered and processed. So information processing was the first step in terms of how they make decisions. Then there was this issue of accessing formal processes and rules. As you may be knowing, HROs have elaborate rules and processes. And as, for example, one of our ACTOs said, if there were no procedures, everything would be improvised and there would be no point in talking about safety. So high reliability organizations have very precise processes and rules that needs to be accessed when there is a critical incident. However, what is also interesting to know is that rules are not the only things that will help them make a decision. In fact, rules help them, but ultimately, it's their sense-making that is creating an intersubjective meaning of what's going on. Because at the end of the day, they have to discern whether the rules and the processes are applicable in the situation or not. So this discernment, this sense-making was something that was very important for the ACTOs, for the air traffic inspectors. And what they talked to us also about was the role of mindfulness in this process of decision making. And when I tried to unpack what they were saying, basically they were saying that there are three ways in which they show their mindfulness. Mindfulness comprises of three elements. One is this focused attention, which is cognitive, on the current moment and experience. So they even use the word like a musician playing music. When you are completely focused on that moment, everything stops for you. When critical incidents are unfolding, they go into this state of concentrated attention. And what was interesting is that they talked about their body as well, awareness of what was going on in their body. Because when you enter into that kind of concentrated cognitive process, you cannot be unaware of what's going on in your body. So they talked a lot about how their heart rate might increase, how they might be feeling sweaty, and how they're aware of the physical sensations that is going on. What was also paradoxical to hear from them is that despite the fact that we believe that mindfulness is complete attention focus on the current moment, they also talked about regulating their attention focus from time to time so that other works also gets done. So let's imagine there's a critical incident that has happened. There's a sudden accident or well, not really an accident yet, but possibility of an accident suddenly. Yet at the same time, I have other planes that are taking off from the airport. So I have to regulate my attention in such a way that I give enough attention to the critical incident. At the same time, the other planes also fly today. So this regulation of attention was something that we found very interesting, because normally when we think of mindfulness, we think that it's only complete focus of attention and not regulating it for doing other things. When we asked them about past experience, what was interesting to note was that they said that there are many ways in which past experience with critical incidents actually help them in their sense of self-efficacy. Of course, it increases their preparedness. They are more prepared because they have been trained. As you may be knowing, so they are trained through simulations, aircraft controllers. They talked about increased repertoire of possible responses. For example, one air traffic controller said that if you have worked in another airport, you have had, other point of views, and you can bring that. So obviously, past experience will have an impact on the way you will handle influences. They spoke a lot about management of stress, how past experience actually helps them to cope with stress. For example, somebody said, I've already seen an airplane land with an engine on fire. So it affects me less than a colleague who's seen it for the first time. And what was very, very interesting for us was to see that they are aware when they have trainings. They become aware of human fallibility. The fact that errors can happen and we are not infallible. We are fallible. We can make mistakes. We are not gods. That maturity, that understanding comes with past experience. And to learn and to tell themselves that what can I do better based on the mistakes that has been done by me or others in this profession. That's what past experience does with us. We also saw some of the organizational factors that help and hinders coping with critical incidents. As far as help is concerned, social support came out as a very important help organizational factor that can help them in coping with critical incidents. And the social support has two components. One is affective. So they repeatedly said that you cannot do a job like our job without help of others. So, and they repeatedly talked about a system of family. So even when another air traffic controller has nothing to do with this, what's going on, he's going to come and chip in when there is a critical incident. And so this has a affective or emotional component, the support system, but there is also an expertise component. And this has been, in the past, shown in the literature of HRO as the concept of deference to expertise. What that means is that in any high reliability organizing, that is organizations where mistakes can lead to loss of life, when there is a critical incident, anybody who has the expertise will jump in and take over, even if it's not his job at the moment. So all of these organizations are going, usually it's the one with expertise who has the right to take over, and everybody supports that. So that's also a kind of social support. So that was something that they, of course, talked about training. And they also talked about the psychological support that can help them. So talking to psychologists is something that they mentioned, helps them on a regular basis to cope with critical incidents. In terms of hindrance, they talked about lack of human resources. The air traffic controllers that we were interviewing, they complained about not having enough air traffic controllers in their service, which obviously leads to long shifts for them. Not good, of course. Long shifts do not allow them to recover. In general, inadequate recovery time. So people work more hours, have less time to rest, and all of that they mentioned as very negative factors in terms of how we cope with critical incidents. And the last thing that came out, which was very interesting in this paper, was an enduring personal impact of critical incidents in the lives of these people. These people actually talk to us about how they carry their critical incidents back home, that they find it hard to detach emotionally from these incidents. They talked about how these critical incidents change who they are to some extent. For example, one air traffic controller said that I try deliberately to be messy when I go back home because I'm so organized. I actually go back home and I make a mess a little bit in my environment because I deliberately try to be a bit messy because otherwise I behave in a very organized and structured form, even in my personal life. So they seem to be constantly struggling with how to change who I am as that air traffic controller who handles these critical incidents to the person I want to be when I go back home. And they talked about how their habits, the way of living life, has undergone a deliberate, enduring change because of the critical incidents that they have managed. So what was clear to us is that when the critical incidents end it doesn't actually end for these people. They carry it with them inside of them. So that was something that was very important in terms of our discovery in the qualitative aspect of this study. Thank you very much